All right, Tom, folks are coming on in. One sec. All right, Tom, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Cochran, the CEO and Executive Director of the United States Conference of Mayors here in Washington, D.C. And I'm pleased to welcome you to our next Local Infrastructure Hub meeting. Today's session of the Local Infrastructure Hub is co-hosted by the United States Conference of Mayors with our incredible partners, Bloomberg Philanthropies and Results for America. In addition to the Bloomberg Philanthropies, we want to thank the Hub's other funding partners, the Walmart Group, Emerson Collective, the Ford Foundation, and the Kresge Foundation. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was decades in the making, and it didn't happen by chance. Through President Biden's leadership and the bipartisan support in Congress, states, mayors, cities now have $1.2 trillion to address needs that have been building up for decades. But we do have a challenge. The $1.2 trillion is spread over 400 federal programs, some of which go to the states to then competitively award them to local governments, our cities. This is especially the case with funding for water and wastewater, lead pipe replacement, and emerging contaminants. If we as cities have lead pipes to replace, we must apply to the states for funding. If we need to address federal mandates such as CSOs, that's combined sewer overflows, emerging contaminants in our drinking water, or expanded wastewater treatment facilities, we got to apply to the states for funding. And let's be honest, folks, as President Biden would say, many cities have different relationships with their governors and the state houses and legislatures. Some have good relationships, but others not so much. This is a challenge. And we know that President Biden is well aware of the work we have in front of us. When Congress writes a $1.2 trillion bill, it's nearly impossible to reform every delivery mechanism in the federal infrastructure programs. This certainly was the case with water and wastewater. But we were able to get some reforms. In the Safe Drinking Water Fund and the Clean Water Fund, all the money goes to the states. But nearly half of these funds must now be distributed to cities in the form of grants or principal forgiveness. The remainder remains loans. This is an important step, one, but we got to build on it and make it better for the future. So essentially, we must continue to work with the states to implement the well water and wastewater parts of the infrastructure law, and we need to document whether the states meet the needs of our cities and certainly for disadvantaged communities. Today, we will hear from three cutting-edge mayors from three very different states on their innovative water infrastructure programs. We'll also how they have approached their states and their strategies to receive infrastructure funding from those states. We welcome Gresham, Oregon Mayor Travis Stovall, who's also the chair of our transit subcommittee, Montgomery, Alabama Mayor Steve Reed, and Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ross Baraka. We also have an incredible moderator, Tracy Meehan, who's the executive director of the American Water Works Association, to lead our mayoral panel and to add his own insights. Tracy's been a long and distinguished career in the water and wastewater field, and we are fortunate to have him with us today. We'll also be joined by David Medina, who's the CEO of Results for America, who will moderate the Q&A sessions. I also want to acknowledge the work of our Conference of Mayors Water Council. If you've not joined the council, please contact Dr. Rich Anderson, its director, or Judy Sheehan, our assistant executive director for the environment. Their contacts are in the chat, and they're also on this call. Before we get to the mayors, though, it's my honor to introduce a dear friend of the Conference of Mayors, Gabe Amo. He's a special assistant to the president for Deputy Director of White House on Intergovernmental Affairs. He's played a significant role with mayors. Each of the four signature legislative accomplishments of the Biden administration, he's been there with us. The American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act with its historic investment in climate that we have never seen before. Today, Gabe will give us an overall update on the infrastructure law, some recent major announcements, his thoughts on the State of the Union, and advice for us on how we can continue to strengthen this partnership. Together, we will work to make sure the implementation of the infrastructure law meets the needs of our cities. That's what we want. That's what the White House wants. And I want to thank Gabe for his help when President Biden invited all the mayors to the White House during the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting. It was good to be in the White House with our dear friend, President Joe Biden. It was an incredible event, and the mayors was very, very appreciative of you and your team, Gabe, as we go forward. So, Gabe, welcome, and thanks for your continued help.
Well, it is a pleasure to be with you. Good afternoon to most folks on the call, though I know we have some West Coast friends for whom it's still late morning. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you today. I also, before I get too far along, want to thank the mayors who will be speaking later in this call for their continued dedication, not only to their own communities, but to advancing the conversation nationally. And of course, to the Conference of Mayors and the host of partners who I won't go through, but I know are all real strong supporters of making sure that we get the implementation right on the local level of this historic moment and this historic opportunity to really improve the lives of so many Americans. There's a lot happening on infrastructure, and I know that you all go through so much on this call, but I just wanted to level set with some top lines. To date, the administration has announced nearly $200 billion in funding and over 20,000 projects or awards. And these awards and projects touch over 4,500 communities. And so that's not everybody, but that's a lot. And that's a lot so far. And so last week, the administration released a map showcasing all the projects and awards that have been made across the 50 states and the territories. And in recent weeks, and you've seen the president on the road to speak to some of these, the president has announced awards for regionally or nationally significant projects, including over $2 billion to upgrade some of our nation's most economically significant bridges and over $1.2 billion in mega grants. These infrastructure investments are going to create good paying jobs, including union jobs and jobs that won't require a college degree. And these projects are going to grow the economy, strengthen supply chains, improve mobility for residents, and make our transportation systems safer for all across the board. Additionally, last week, and I think this is so important for so many of you, and I know it will be disseminated in so many ways, you know that we've been working really hard with many on this call and beyond to make funding opportunities for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law accessible and transparent so that folks like you know what to apply for, who to contact, and how to get ready to rebuild. And so our goal is to continue to help governments navigate, access, and deploy resources that are going to help build a better America. So there is a new updated calendar of notices of funding opportunities that is on bill.gov. You know, bookmark it. It should have information on deadlines and links to applications as they become live. So really important resource for you to take advantage of. And then the last thing I'll say is sort of about the big picture is that the White House infrastructure team released new state-by-state fact sheets last week that outlined the progress in all 50 states, DC, and the territories as of January 13th. And this is really important because you know, the progress that we're making is so broad and wide. It's important to take a moment and look and see what's happening in your jurisdiction and in your state. It's a good illustration of all the work that we've done, but also it indicates all the work that lies ahead. Now, Tom referenced the State of the Union, and I do want to touch on that briefly before going to the issue of water. The president, you know, outlined his vision on how we grow the economy from the bottom up and middle out and not the top down. And so that economic agenda is embedded in all of the work around infrastructure. Really, and you heard the president repeat this, and why you are such important partners to this is really about finishing the job. It's one thing to pass a law. It's another thing to implement the legislation to make sure that no one is left behind. And finishing the job alongside the key priorities that I note on the economy are going to improve the standard of living in people's lives. and it's going to keep people safe, people's water, people's roads, and people's livelihoods writ large. So it's really important to have that moment that the State of the Union presents, because as the president said, the State of the Union is strong, but because its people are strong, and you are such a big part of all of that work. I know Tom mentioned having the mayors here at the White House, and another really key opportunity. And what was important there was the emphasis on implementation across the rescue plan, across the infrastructure law, across the Inflation Reduction Act. We had our leaders here at the White House speak to mayors, and this is a conversation that we'll keep going. But it's important to note that we wanted to bring that conversation together, because these aren't separate pieces of the economic agenda. They all flow together, and it's really important that we think about the real comprehensive work that we can do together. Some updates in the area of water funding, and I think I have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to be quick. Just yesterday, on the issue of emerging contaminants, Administrator Regan announced the availability $2 billion to address PFAS in drinking water across the country. And this investment, which goes to states and territories, something that I know Tom noted is sometimes a challenge for you all. But this investment will be made available to communities as grants through EPA's emerging contaminants in small or disadvantaged communities grant program, and will really work to promote access to safe and clean water in small, rural, and disadvantaged communities while supporting local economies. Additionally, just a couple of weeks ago here at the White House, the Vice President announced new actions to protect communities from lead pipes and paint. And so on the issue of lead pipes, which I know is very important to so many folks, the administration has a new partnership called Get the Lead Out, in partnership with state and local leaders, non-governmental organizations, water utilities, labor unions, and others. And so the goal is to really create an innovative partnership to leverage existing efforts and funding to meet our commitment to accelerate the replacement of lead service lines and pipes by the end of the decade, while also serving the economic imperative, creating good paying jobs and prioritizing lead remediation efforts in overburdened and underserved communities. And so this coalition starts with an inaugural group of 100 plus members, and we can make sure that if you are a community where this makes sense, that you join this partnership. The next part of the Vice President's big announcement just 3 weeks ago was a new initiative for rolling out from the EPA called its lead service line replacement accelerators. And so this is going to be launched in partnership with the Department of Labor, the states of Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to provide targeted technical assistance services to communities to make progress on replacing lead pipes that pose a risk to the health of children and families. And so through this initiative, EPA will provide hands-on support to guide communities through the process of lead service line removals from start to finish. And this technical assistance will include helping to develop lead service line replacement plans, conducting inventories to identify lead pipes, including community outreach and education, and supporting applications for the critical bipartisan infrastructure law funding that we're talking about on this call. So be on the lookout there as well. And so I know that there are some other really critical investments here in the bill, from storm water management to the sustainable water supply through the drinking water state revolving fund, and of course wastewater treatment is so important. But I'm going to stop there because I know I've talked for a bit and hand the call over, because I think there is some discussion to be had. So thank you.
Gabe, thanks for those very timely remarks and for your longtime partnership with all of us. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Medina, and as the COO and co-founder of Results for America, it is my pleasure to be here with all of you today. As promised, we will now open our session up for any questions any of you may have for Gabe. And so please feel free to come off mute and to ask your questions or to share them in the chat. And our first question is from Mayor Brown of Youngstown, Ohio. Mayor Brown?
Good afternoon, everyone. Gabe, how you doing, man? Every time you speak, I always think, how can he tell us more? You seem to always be able to give us more, some great information. First, I want to thank you and the president for this infrastructure bill, which is key to many of our communities, definitely a mayor like myself in Youngstown, Ohio. The question I have, Gabe, is how will the states be held accountable to make sure that they meet the president's Justice 40 initiative for funding the poor neighborhoods like in Youngstown, Ohio, where we really can't afford the mandates that are put on us. And when it's time for me to explain to my citizens, in order for me to pay for these mandates, I have to put more money, I have to tax them more. But yet we have it at the state level, and we're trying to figure out how can we keep them accountable for those monies to really get down to the people who need it the most and deserve the most as well. So just wanted to see what could we do as mayors to help get them to be more accountable to what the president's trying to do. And I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's always good to hear your voice and see you. So look, I think on the topic of Justice 40, for those who are not familiar, this is an early pledge and executive order from the president to ensure that 40% of the benefits of some of the big federal programs would hit communities who are overburdened and underserved. That's my sort of short version of it, but there's a lot of additional language there. All that to say is the list of covered programs for Justice 40 is still sort of being developed real time. There is an initial list right now. And I think one of the challenges and one of the priorities that the administration is taking upon is making sure that we, one, socialize the programs that are Justice 40 eligible, so that for the federal component of meeting the requirements there, that there's full transparency. And then on the topic of working with your state governments, this is why, as you just heard me say, with the partnership that the vice president has started, while on lead service lines, while we weren't wholesale changing the way that the funds are flowing, we are in the federal government very conscious of the ability that we have to, one, speak to state governments, and two, to form partnerships that cut through and get directly to communities the technical assistance that they require. And so you saw very early on in the after the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Administrator Regan send a letter to all governors, encourage rapid deployment of revolving funds to really spur action to ensure that the water supply in communities was adequately served. And so look for a continued push from the administration to make sure that there aren't discrepancies based on where your city is and in what state, without regard to the local dynamics and the statewide political dynamics. And so we will continue to have leadership throughout the administration push on the levers that we have, which are a lot around scrutinizing the way that funds flow after they leave Washington, D.C.
Right. And so thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, Gabe. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. I think we have another question now from Mayor County of Des Moines, Iowa.
All right, thank you. Gabe, quickly, let me also add my thanks for your work with the nation's mayors, and please extend to the president our thanks for hosting us at the White House. Also, I want to, from my own self and my own heart, thank you for the call from yourself and the note from the president following the horrible shooting at our Second Chance education facility here in Des Moines. It gave me a boost during a pretty low moment. But the water and wastewater issues, it's a difficult one for most of us, or many of us for sure. Most of the pollution coming into Des Moines is produced by big ag and big chemical companies. Yet the agricultural pollution comes into our city from the watershed outside of our city. And the way the laws are written, the citizens of Des Moines have to pay for its treatment when they didn't even cause it. Plus, it's no secret our state house and governor are probably going to favor those interests. We're really David versus Goliath out here. Plus, affordability is a huge issue. We can't just have our low and moderate income residents shouldering the burden when the big companies are walking away with incredible profits. But that's what's happening out here. I know this is more of a comment than a question, but anything the administration can do to help states see the light of day to work with us at the local level would really be appreciated. I think we really need to figure out our next steps. EPA needs to strengthen affordability factors, not weaken them.
Thank you, Mayor, for that question / comment. I am certainly mindful of those burdens, and that is and is a big reason why a lot of the funding that I've mentioned will see EPA work towards greater communication with state governments about how to remediate some of the impacts that you face in Des Moines and other cities face, but then also additional funding has been announced, especially on the agriculture side, for voluntary conservation plans and programs. And some of this flows out of the Inflation Reduction Act. So sort of what I spoke to earlier, where these different big pieces of legislation will start to flow together. This is one area where there is significant funding, especially with the climate impacts that the agricultural community makes to address some of these broader water challenges that communities like yours would be facing.
Thank you, Mayor County. Thank you, Gabe. We have time for just one more question. I apologize to all of you. Just trying to keep us moving along. We have a question from Mayor Norton of Rochester, New York. Mayor Norton?
Rochester, Minnesota, just to be clear. That's okay. Happens all the time. The city of Rochester and the city council just approved a $60 million upgrade and repair to our water and wastewater treatment plant, which is great. We're counting on state and federal dollars to help us move that project forward. And one of the issues was phosphate nutrient. They've lowered the levels that we have to reach, right? So we're working on that, and that's part of this upgrade. But to your point about PFAS, it is a concern for communities like ours who already have a $60 million project working on one area when we know PFAS and other chemicals are going to be regulated soon. And while we've hired away 2 experts from the state of Minnesota to help us in our city, and we feel really good about that, very helpful to the process, how can we be more at the table with the EPA given these major mandates that'll be coming our way? The state's talking about it already, and you mentioned it at the federal level as well. There are huge fiscal impacts to our community, and all the budgeting we've done will be kind of out the window as we move ahead. So can you help us increase the dialogue with the EPA and the regulatory side of OMB?
Yes, I think that is just the type of feedback that we're looking for, especially as communities start to allocate their own resources, making sure that it blends with what the federal government is putting forward. And so I anticipate that there are going to be more communities like yours who are taking a lead on these types of investments. And so one thing that I will most certainly take from your comment and question, Mayor, is to our OMB colleagues on just how we should develop a better strategy around, making sure that you're aware of what's coming downstream from the federal government, especially around the rulemaking for some of this funding that is going forward. And that makes perfect sense. And I certainly know that water is a very hot topic here, and I think people will be receptive to some on the ground feedback like you just provided, but thank you for that.
And Mayor Norton from Minnesota, my apologies. It is now my pleasure.
Just remember Mayo's Clinic. That's all you got to remember, right, Mayor?
Got it, Tom. Got it, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Gabe, for spending time with us today here. It is now my pleasure to introduce Tracy Meehan, the Executive Director of Government Affairs at the American Water Works Association, the largest nonprofit scientific and educational association dedicated to managing and treating water, who will be moderating our panel of mayors. Welcome, Tracy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here talking to the critical leadership in our cities throughout America, especially in light of this great historic opportunity to fund so much environmental progress on many fronts, but certainly on the water and wastewater front. As Tom mentioned earlier, most of the money in the water and wastewater area are going through the existing institutions. That is the state revolving loan funds, which Congress basically, followed that route because that was the existing institutions that were in place, and it was kind of a known pattern, notwithstanding the effort it takes to work through that process. But one thing to keep in mind is your project has to get on that state's intended use plans. Those are the plans that the state sets up and guides the distribution of those SRF dollars. So keep that buzz phrase in mind, intended use plans. So with that, we're going to get into some concrete cases here of various communities and mayors that are pursuing funding for a variety of activities. And our first mayor, well, I'm going to introduce all three of them, and then we'll go through each one at a time. But we're honored to have here Mayor Travis Stovall of Gresham, Oregon, who is the first Black mayor of Gresham and the only major city in the Portland metro area throughout the state. He was first sworn in 2021. He's a small business owner and served as CEO of EREP Inc. And he's also former vice president of the TriMet Board of Directors. He's been featured in the Oregonian for his dynamic leadership as president of the Board of Directors of the Gresham Area Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Center. In addition, we have Mayor Stephen Reed of Montgomery, Alabama. Mayor Reed is the first African-American mayor of Montgomery, having served since 2019. Previously, Mayor Reed served as Montgomery County, Alabama's first African-American and youngest selected probate judge. He received the Dr. Martin Luther King Leadership Award and has done very well in that regard. Excuse me here. Yeah, he's also been active in so many other areas in the community. Finally, I don't know if Mayor Ross Baraka of Newark, New Jersey is here, but he's joining us. And when he gets on, we'll talk about his experiences there in Newark. He's been mayor of Newark since 2014, presides as the president of the New Jersey Urban Mayors Association, and is executive board member of the New Jersey League of Municipalities. He's co-chair of the National League of Cities Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, the vice chair for Ports, Transportation, and Communications, and the committee at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He's a member of the EPA's Local Government Advisory Committee, and as mayor, he has spearheaded an effort to replace all 23,000 known lead service lines in less than 3 years at no cost to the residents. So this is a great panel, and after those introductions, let me just start with Mayor Stovall, and then I'll do one question to each, and we'll go around the horn a second time and as many times as time allows. But welcome back to the Local Innovation Hub, Mayor Stovall. In your back, you have many popular responses to your previous appearance. It's remarkable how much energy demand our water and wastewater systems require. Water is very, very heavy to move, just to begin with, much less to treat. And you put together a remarkable renewable energy project, which has reaped many benefits for the community. And could you just walk us through that project and tell us a little bit about it and how it was financed?
Absolutely, Tracy. Appreciate the opportunity to share, as you referenced, this panel with Mayors Reed and Mayor Baraka. What an opportunity to sit among these mayors. So yeah, we started this project actually quite a few years ago. And what our focus was to see if we could get to a net zero energy usage at our wastewater treatment plant, which is an incredible task when you think about it, because our wastewater treatment plant is, of course, one of the largest electricity users that the city has. And so we first started with a ground-based solar array, and we get roughly about 7% of our energy from our ground-based solar array. But then we also moved to a cogeneration solution that actually uses our fats, oil, and grease that we take in, and we also receive a tipping fee for receiving those. And then we utilize that energy to produce heat and various opportunities within the within the wastewater treatment plant to effectively push to a net zero, and actually to some degree a net positive, where we're actually creating more energy than we're using, which we actually save about $500,000, so $500,000 a year electricity costs, and we get another $250,000 a year through our tipping fees. So clearly this is a net benefit for our community, and it shows by the nature of we have some of the lowest wastewater treatment costs throughout the entire state of similar sized cities, and many cities that are somewhat smaller than us. And so that benefit inures to the actual ratepayer. You know, earlier I know the mayor was just referencing some of the challenges you have with the increasing rates based on having to treat wastewater from some of the industrial users. Well, we're actually benefiting from the fact that we've put all of these resources together. We've paid for that through various types of state funding mechanisms, federal mechanisms, and then also, again, some of the rate paying. And then now we also pay for it through the tipping fees and the savings that we now get. So I would encourage each of my fellow colleagues and mayors to look at opportunities to leverage the bipartisan infrastructure law and these investments that we get to make in infrastructure that continues to, what I say, gives the gift that keeps on giving.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Reed, I know you've got challenges, as all communities do, with water and wastewater and infrastructure and O&M. How have you tapped into or at least hoping to tap into the bipartisan infrastructure laws? And what about some of the other sources like the American Rescue Plan or the Fiscal Recovery Fund? Any thoughts and lessons you can share with the audience today?
Sure, Tracy, first I want to thank you all for having us, and certainly a pleasure to be on with my colleagues, Mayor Stovall and Mayor Baraka, and all the mayors that are on this call. You know, I tried to listen and learn a lot at the winter meeting that we just had in DC to determine if we were on the right track. And I think for the most part we are. I did pick up some great advice from some of the mayors and some of those panels about some things that we can do, and I brought that back here to Montgomery. But, you know, for us, you know, we worked in partnership with our county officials to leverage the American Rescue Plan Act dollars in such a way that we felt, you know, by combining those resources, that might provide the best opportunity for us to go to our state agency, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, ADEM. Typically a conservative agency in the sense of what they do, not how they think, but in terms of just kind of what they do and the type of projects that we normally see around the state. And together, the city and the county committed a substantial amount of American Rescue Plan Act funding to advance traditional public sewer plans in neighborhoods where we knew there was a high need. We knew there were, you know, neighborhoods that were at risk of flooding, just even in regular rains, much less when we get heavy storms like we tend to get here in Alabama. But we also have a number of residents that are not connected to the sewer system because of the associated tap-in fees, which here can, you know, range up to $4,000, you know, per home. That is a sizable amount for many residents, much less those that are in low to moderate income areas. And so we wanted to see how we could help them by addressing the connectivity from our standpoint. And we have started a study to, you know, really look at evaluating stormwater drainage and how we can really move that off of their property so that we don't see some of the challenges that we've had here in the past. And believe it or not, our city and our community had not done that in the past, in particular in underserved neighborhoods. And so when you think about those areas where it's needed most, we just had not seen that effort. And we think these action steps, from our standpoint, will, really help us prioritize our investments and better position us to go after federal aid as well as philanthropic grants to advance these infrastructure goals. So that's kind of the initial plan that we have been utilizing thus far. And, one of the things I think we all have to keep in mind as we look at some of the BIL funding and working with our states is really leveraging our relationships with our state delegations and leveraging our relationships with our state agencies. And not just at a time when, the money's on the table, it has to be an ongoing relationship. And that's something that, we probably had not done as a city or as a county prior to the last couple of years. And we started to see how they base their formulas, what they base it on, how we update our studies and our plans so that we can be turnkey ready when there's an opportunity. And that's been a learning process for us, but it's also been a positive process for us to share with our state leaders, but also get some of their feedback as well.
Well, thank you, Mayor Reed. I think Mayor Baraka is running a little late, but he'll be with us shortly. And I know one of the stories he'll talk about is the tremendous support he got from the state government and the SRF even prior to the BIL becoming law. I see Mayor Baraka, you're with us now. Anyway, see, he's just logging on. Anyway, Mayor Stovall, let me ask you this. How about that sources of state money, whether it's SRF or other sources, looking forward, these challenges, as generous and as welcome as the BIL is, you take lead service line replacements in some communities, the 15 billion is a good down payment, but it's probably less than a third of what we're going to need to remove all lead service lines. And then the long-standing need to replace and enhance, just the pipes and the tunnels and everything else. Are you looking at other sources in state government besides the SRF, or is that still going to be the main play?
Absolutely, great question. And I don't think I want to even limit the conversation to just the state funding. We absolutely are looking at various levels of state funding, WIFIA funding, you name it. We're putting them all together. And I think you mentioned it perfectly when you referenced the amount of funding that's coming through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's historic, as we all know, although it's going to take more than just those dollars to be able to build out what we need to. And so we're looking at not even just the ones from a state funding perspective and from a federal funding perspective, but we're also actually improving our ammonia extraction right now through a private-public partnership with some of our industry. They were going to build an ammonia extraction solution on their facility, and they came to us and we partnered together. They're paying for a substantial portion of this at our plant. And so we're even leveraging that funding to be able to truly positively impact what we can do in our communities. And furthermore, we're talking about wastewater. We're actually putting in a groundwater system at this point because we saw water rates escalating over the years. And so now what we're doing is we're being able to lower our actual water rates through putting in a different water solution. And again, all of this really points to ensuring that we can pull down all of our rates for our individuals that live in our city, which many times those are the most vulnerable folks. So leveraging all of the pots of money, bringing them together to be able to build out solutions that bring that equity that we're talking about. Mayor Reed referenced it in regards to some of the folks in this community and not being able always to access some of the utilities that they need. And all of these things are bringing those rates down to effectively and positively ensure that these individuals, our most vulnerable individuals, have access. So utilizing all of the pots of money is going to be critical to achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve. And so, yeah, we're accessing those local government dollars, state dollars, and federal dollars. And then the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is an absolute catalyst for doing the things that we've got to accomplish.
Well, it's great to hear that your P3 project is going so well. I mean, there's the vast amounts of private capital out there, and it'd be great to get it into the municipal sector where we can make it work. The need is great. AWWA did a study back in 2012 called Buried No Longer, and posited $1 trillion need for both replacement and expansion, you know, given population growth. And that was a lot of money. EPA puts it about half that, but those figures, whether you go with EPA's number of AW, that's just drinking water. You could do the same for wastewater or stormwater, as Mayor Reed discussed. Mayor Baraka, are you with us?
I am. Apologize for being late. I had to perform a wedding, you know, as part of our responsibilities.
Well, I understand. That's important. Well, anyway, welcome, Mayor. It's so great to have you here. And, you know, your success there in Newark with lead pipe replacement was quite outstanding. It was a very aggressive program. I know your general manager there. He's a great guy. And would you tell us about the project and how you funded it and managed the whole process?
Yeah, it's very huge. You know, ultimately at the beginning, we were going with the state's plan, and this is why it takes a long time for people to get it done. One is the thinking that, you know, you should be focusing on the corrosion control first and change the lead service lines over a period of time. And so they use the state infrastructure bank to do that. And we really get that money little by little as they have it, because it's not plentiful, I would imagine. And then try to use some of the federal drinking water and other legislation that allows monies to be used for this. And so the plan was to do that over a 10-year period, while you change the corrosion control, use the filters, change the corrosion control until the lead levels drop below what the limit should be, and change the lead service lines in the process. We you know, had tested some of the filters, and 2 of them were malfunctioning. And I think it sent everybody into a panic, which forced me to try to come up with a quicker solution. So we had to bond the money. And luckily the county was able to, they have a better bond rating than we did. So we used their bond rating to get an additional $120 million on top of the money we already had. And then I had to worry about the debt service. So we were in negotiation with Port Authority at the time, and thank God we got yeses from everywhere, which has a lot to say about the relationships that we built, because one no would have derailed this whole thing. They decided, they agreed, the board there at Port Authority, to give us $6 million over a 30-year period or so to that we're using to pay the debt service down on the lead service line, so the taxpayers do not have to burden that, or the ratepayers do not have to burden that as well. And so we had the money up front, given the money we had already, as well as the bond money, and we used it to change about over 20,000 lead service lines in less than 3 years. We put together, used it as a public works project. So we hired and trained local residents to get them to help us replace the lead service lines. And then obviously we had to RFP the big companies out to get it done. We used it where they kind of just dig a small hole and they shoot take the lead service line out of the little hole and shoot the new copper line in there and attach it from the outside to the basement. So it didn't take that long to do. And it wasn't that invasive in your house. So I thought it was a good method. And we hired a lot of local people. We hired small businesses in the area to support that. So it turned out to be something great in the end. That started off terrible. It turned out to be something good for us, because we got every single lead service line changed in our city. We had to change a few laws, but we did it.
Well, a lot of partnerships, a lot of innovation. Mayor Stovall talked about his public-private partnership. You had a public-public partnership with the county on the guarantee. That's fantastic to see that kind of intergovernmental collaboration on such an important issue of public health. Mayor Reed, you know, all this money is going through the states, i.e. that means the state revolving loan funds. A lot of communities in line there. There's urban, rural, you know, interest, many competing applicants, if you will. Do you have any advice for mayors on working with the states and you know, pursuing, dealing with the challenges, whether it's a fair distribution of the money or attention to disadvantaged communities within larger urban areas? Any thoughts on that you'd want to share with your colleagues?
Sure. I think that all of us, probably deal with that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, regardless of what the issue is. And anytime you have a windfall of money, it's kind of like, people who win the lottery. You get a lot of new friends and you find out you have a lot more cousins than you see at family reunions. So everybody is scrambling for the money and everybody is trying to come up with all these, reasons why they should get more of the money. And I think, for us, there are probably a couple of things that have worked. First, we're singing from the same hymnal, if you will. We're singing it from the same song across the board, whether it's city, county, and state. We're presenting, one unified vision for what we would like to do with the money. Those who have been outliers have been kicked out of the choir and out of the group. So if you can't sing on with the same note that we're singing on, then good luck, taking that message yourself. But I think that's very important because a unified message has a lot more appeal at the state level, just like it does at the federal level. Anybody coming to see us as mayors. I think the second thing is, we have to clearly articulate, the needs within our city and our community. And that's not a long laundry list. I think there's one thing, obviously, that, many folks at our state agencies want to see is, how have you prioritized it? What pre-planning have you done? And have you, really kind of scaled down how you want to invest the money? And we use the word invest as opposed to spend because everybody wants a return on that investment. Spending, I believe, says that you don't really have a plan for how it's going to be used. You just want to, push some money out there. And so we really, choose our language, intentionally, whether it be speaking in public or in private meetings, to talk about this is an investment in our cities, the investment in our communities and our residents, and it's one they need. And I think, probably the last thing I would say is that, mayors have to be the best advocates for their cities. Doing it collaboratively and collectively is something that needs to be done. But, we have the platform, we have the power to convene, and that is across the board, grassroots leaders, business leaders, those that are really shaping and influencing our communities. And I think our ability to advocate for projects like this at a time like this is very important, because if you don't, you end up kind of missing that window and you fall behind maybe some other communities, and you may even fall behind some other projects because the state agencies have their wish list, they have their dreams that they want, and whether or not they have a plan or not, they have the money. So we know that our case to them has to be airtight, and part of that is making sure that we utilize a platform that the mayors have in creating that to the community, creating that to local and state leaders, as well as other stakeholders that are involved in what we're doing, and really want to see the best outcomes for how this money impacts the people who we represent.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Reed. We're as I say, I think we've all recognized the historic nature of the BIL and what an opportunity this is. On the other hand, we're going to see more revisions of the lead and copper rule, which are going to, put a little more pressure on everybody in the regulated sector to comply. We're going to see new MCLs in the Safe Drinking Water Act for PFAS contaminants, 2, 4, 6, who knows? We're going to see a hazardous substance designation for PFAS, which is going to drive up disposal costs for biosolids and residue from granular activated. So the costs are coming, and the increased costs are coming. I just want to mention one other program that as you start getting into the big money needs, not that SRF doesn't deal with big money needs, but the WIFIA program, which AWWA helped get in place, does provide a lot of opportunities to bundle packages, not just big CSOs or big water treatment, but lead service line replacement, landscape work. Philadelphia just got a big a loan from the WIFIA program at EPA, and they're putting it all together. So just wanted to flag that as just another opportunity out there amongst all the wonderful things we're getting out of the BIL too. So with that, Mr. Mayor Stovall, I wanted to go back to your program, that ancillary program collecting oil and grease from probably hundreds of restaurants. I can't imagine how many in your community. How did you herd all those cats together to get that program working? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, you basically have a few folks that actually do the pickup and transportation of the fats, oils, and grease. And so what we did is we worked with those transporters to ensure they could pick those up efficiently and then move those to the wastewater treatment plant. And initially we put in one cogenerator and then put in a second cogenerator when we noticed how effective and efficient it was being. And so collecting all of that fat, oils, and grease really, again, comes from a perspective of working with a fairly finite number of transporters and folks that go and pick it up from their restaurant customers and different types of producers of those what we call FOG types of ancillary byproducts of whatever they're doing. So that's how it's worked, and it's worked highly successfully. As I already referenced, we're getting roughly about $250,000 in tipping fees for a fuel solution that we then can utilize to power parts of our plant and provide heat and various things to make it a more efficient process. And what you just said, Tracy, I referenced it very briefly before, but our entire groundwater solution that we're putting in place now, we did through a WIFIA loan. So
great.
So that's literally we just about a year ago was when we got the notification that it was approved, and we're moving forward with a substantial project that again lowers the overall cost of water to our residents. I mean, that's tremendous when you think about folks and their ability to access clean drinking water at an affordable rate that allows the most vulnerable of our communities to absolutely put those dollars into education and transportation, to work opportunities and things like that. So the best we can do for them is to lower those utility costs to give them the highest and best opportunity to go from poverty to prosperity.
Yeah, that's great. One other feature WIFIA, and I hate to be on the soapbox too long, but you can sculpt the interest payments over time. In other words, if you've got other debt you want to reduce, you can push the payment off for years, and the whole term is almost 30 to 40 years, depending on how you. So that's great to hear, Mayor Stovall. Mayor Baraka, if I might come back to you, and just with all you've done with that big project, what kind of lessons learned can you maybe articulate for the other mayors in the audience tonight or today? And what do people need to be thinking about dealing with these immense challenges and the need for resources from any place you can garner them?
Well, ultimately you need the capital up front to be able to do the type of work that we're talking about. If you don't have that capital up front, it's going to make it incredibly difficult for you to do anything. The process, the way this thing works now, is they kind of siphon off the money to you little by little, which is really like counterintuitive to getting this done. That can't happen. You have to find a way to get the bulk of that money up front. These businesses are not going to do the work that they need to do without being able to be paid for it. So that's incredibly important. And so we have to stop focusing on corrosion control, get everybody's mind off of that and start focusing on lead service lines, number one. Number two, if the lead service lines are owned by the residents, because some cities don't own the lead service lines, or they might be owned by, well, the city doesn't own it at all. Either the residents own it, or if you have a private company running your water system, they actually own the lead service lines. So to change a lead service line is very costly. And what people try to do is put the cost back on to the ratepayers. And sometimes the seniors and other people that are on fixed incomes will refuse to do that. They're not going to get their lead service line changed because they don't have the money. So you have to be able to subsidize that. That's why you need that cost up front. You have to be able to subsidize that. And if they own it, you actually cannot use public money to change a private person's lead service line because everybody in the city doesn't have a lead service line. So in essence, you're taking somebody else's money to fix somebody's private situation. So you have to have an emergency kind of law or order or directive from the state legislature, municipal legislature, whatever you're directed by. In New Jersey, we directed by the state. So to give you the authority to be able to pay for this specific special thing because it's a public health issue. Locally, we had to change the law because once again, this is other people's property, and we can't just go on other people's property and fix their lead service line. In essence, you had to go in their house. So you need the homeowner to actually give you permission to go in there. Unfortunately, in Newark, 75% of the people in the city rent. And it would have been another 30,000 years to find every homeowner because a lot of the homeowners are absentee. They don't even live in the city to get them to sign a paper, which would have been impossible for them to do. So we passed a local ordinance that allow us, for public health reasons, to go on your property and change your lead service line, whether you were there or not, or agreed or not. You just had to have somebody, obviously had to let us in the house. And we were able to get that done with very little pushback, but very little pushback. Obviously, those folks who think that this law is going to live past lead service lines to say, I'm not giving you permission to come on my property to do anything, that's going to be a thing. So obviously you have to solve for that in the process, because people are concerned about giving the government authority to come on their property, obviously without their permission. So we
Great.
did it, thank God. And that's something that you absolutely positively need to think about.
Hey,
Well,
Tracy, can I jump in real quick?
You
Just-
certainly may.
just
Quickly,
one
if you would, Mayor.
Look, Levity, I just want to thank Mayor Baraka, the 50th year of hip hop, for utilizing that other people's property, that OPP language in there. I want to let him know I caught that when you're talking about Naughty by Nature. It's from East Orange, New Jersey. So that may be how he got that done, because he was able to speak a different language than maybe some of us. So I appreciate that, Mayor, how you worked that in there.
Yes, sir.
Got it. David, I guess I should kick it over to you at this point.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Tracy, and special thanks to Mayor Stovall, Reed, and Baraka for spending part of your Valentine's Day with us. It's been great. In building on your conversation, we've shared in the chat a guide which highlights the federal funding opportunities available for everything we've been talking about today. We hope you will all find this funding guide useful as you decide what clean and wastewater projects you want to advance in your cities. So please check that out. At this point, I would like to ask all of you to please respond to a quick Zoom poll, which we'll also be sending around. Please complete this survey now. It will take you 2 minutes or less. This just helps provide good background information on today's event and future events. So if you take 2 minutes, please, right now. Great. And in closing, we'd like to thank all of you again for spending part of your Valentine's Day with us. We hope you'll join us for our next session, which will be on February 28th, and we'll be sharing Federal Inflation Reduction Act guidance for local leaders during that session. So February 28th. And as always, you can find more information about everything we've talked about today on our website, www.localinfrastructure.org. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day.
everyone.